that it's like, this is so good, but just, if you guys like this, just like you have no idea what's coming. So it just makes me more and more hyped to see how the rest of the season develops in your guys' opinion.
It's always good when you're making a first season show and, you know, you do it in a vacuum. And so it's always a great part of the process to finally be able to share it with people. And for a show like this to have a premiere at Wondercon and share it with the fans is always really exciting. So I think we all were encouraged and we felt welcomed, and it was cool. Well, they're sort of inextricably tied. You know, Charlie's an extension of the Wraith, and the Wraith is an extension of Charlie, and so that plays out through the narrative of the first season in a lot of interesting ways. It was really fun for me to get to learn how to drive it and to have my own relationship with the car as an actor. Darri and I spent a lot of time in that car together.
He's good at driving that car.
It's fun. It's really cool.
So we're backing it up all over the place.
I would. Between takes, I'd reset the car, and you know, it's the car is definitely its own. It's a character on the show, and so I'm excited to be able to kind of continue that relationship, and the car has relationships with other characters on the show as well. So it's definitely a big part of the world. It's a big part of the world that Joe created, and I think we've been able to make it a part of our show in a really interesting and cinematic way, which is exciting.
Now I've been thinking a lot about love and connection between people, and how simple and complicated this sort of most basic emotion is. And I was really interested in this man who would do anything for his daughter, who adores her, but he would say he would do anything for her, but at the same time there's things that he is in a way incapable of doing. And that conflict and that sort of vibration between these two instincts or drives, I think is like a really human and thing that I'm fascinated by.
Female heroines, like often superheroes that are women, and it's been super empowering to see these on our screens. What I have noticed is there is a lot of emphasis placed on kind of external strength or an unwavering emotional fortitude, and what I loved about Vic and what we discussed with Jamie early on was that she's terrified when she shows up, and she's courageous, and that is her strength. Her heart is her strongest muscle. Her superpowers are her creativity, her intuition, her vulnerability, her empathy, and all of these kind of typically feminine traits are kind of coming to the forefront, and is what she utilizes to take on this force of evil. Would you say?
Yeah.
No, I don't know. He's a wounded man. I think that was also what initially drew me to the script as well. We had an amazing dialect coach, Amanda Quaid, and I know you guys worked with her as well. I think we had a generational divide as well in terms of the accents. Originally, I think we went in thinking that I would have a strong Massachusetts accent, but then doing the research and seeing, you know, young people at kind of poetry slams and stuff like that, I noticed that the accent wasn't actually present, and for a young girl who's kind of trying to escape that environment, the kind of the gentrification, is that the correct word for it? The gentrification of the accent? No? Okay. What's the word I'm looking for? Assimilation, maybe. Yeah. Let's go with assimilation. The assimilation into the kind of the standard American accent felt more appropriate. And so I think it kind of creates that, the dynamic between the older generation who kind of want to stay or are trapped in the environment that they exist in, and Vic, who is trying to escape it.
Yeah, I think, you know, the more you learn about Manx, the more you realize how failed he was as a child, and how much trauma he experienced at a very young age, and how the lack of resolution of that trauma and the inability to examine it is actually what evolves him into this kind of monster. And so kind of building on what Ebon was saying, it's like the idea of like how do you, like where is the love, and how do you love a character that's so evil and doing such reprehensible things. And I think, you know, for me it's been about like going back to the source of that trauma. And I think, you know, what we were trying to build is the idea that like Manx actually really thinks he's doing good on some level, you know, saving these kids from their neglectful and selfish, thoughtless parents. He doesn't really give so much thought or consideration to the cost. But that was important for me, you know, to really understand that monsters are created through trauma and abuse and neglect, and Manx is no exception to that. So how do we integrate that to make him a little bit more multidimensional, a little bit more complex, and not so one thing? I think that's important, an important part of making the show compelling and drawing audiences into the multiple levels of complexity that exist in him and in the world.
I think the crazy thing is like you said, all the characters in a way have been like these failed children, and so you sort of see the result. The cool thing about this TV show is that the characters and their backstories are so expanded, and you see so much more of what it's like to be them. You sort of see the aftermath of what happens when kids are neglected and they're not taken care of properly, and you're kind of faced with the fragility of kids as a whole, because on one hand you do have someone who thinks he's rescuing them and saving them from these awful situations, and that's something that we can all agree needs to happen. These kids can't be in these situations, but I think it makes you take a look at yourself in the real world as well, because you're also faced with what it means to actually handle those situations as they're supposed to be, which sometimes means separation from parents. And in some of the characters that have had to do that for themselves, you see even the aftermath of that. And so it's kind of this terrifying thing in a sense, where like you have the supernatural stuff going on, but you also have the very real consequences of reality and the way that we affect each other in family relationships and friend relationships. And I think for all of us it was kind of having to take a deep breath and like reflect on that within ourselves and our own lives and our realities, and tap into that to give it an authenticity that it deserves.
The idea that things were one thing isn't actually a reality. I think there's a line later on that Linda says, and I'm paraphrasing here because I can't entirely remember it, but it was that people can be good and bad at the same time. And I think I really appreciate that multi-dimensionality and the contradictions that exist within a single human being, because there is, you know, we are multifaceted souls, and that was something I really lent into with Vic as well, the contradictions, the pulls and the pushes within her, and it was really exciting to play, and I'm looking forward to digging in a little further for season 3, hopefully.
I'm not wearing any makeup. Now I have a full one. Yeah, the makeup was really important. You know, I had been interested in the idea of really being able to disappear into a character and transform myself in significant ways, and so that was one of the things that drew me to this role and to this project. And it was really important that we found truly the best people for the job. I had worked with Joel Harlow before, and so when I signed onto the project and I was meeting with Jamie and Kari, I said, you know, I really feel like we got to try to get Joel. I know it's a tall order, but luckily he was available and interested and came on board and was such an amazing ally and collaborator for all of us. You know, we really worked on what's important about the look of this guy, and what, you know, how do we represent and honor the character that Joe wrote, and bring him to life in a cinematic visual way. And Joel did an amazing job, you know, did amazing renderings and sculptures, and then built the prosthetics from that. And and one of the other things we all did was identify the stages of Manx's aging process, you know. And so we came up with 5 looks that then we kind of assigned throughout the season based on where he was in his story. So it became a bit of a formula for us to understand exactly what look it was, and then I was able to go off and develop physicality and vocal choices for each one of the phases, so that, you know, when I showed up to work every day, we knew exactly what we were doing, and I knew exactly which version of the character I had to step into that day. So it was a unique process. It involved a lot of planning and a lot of you know, everybody getting on the same page. But once we got into production, you know, I had sometimes 4.5 hours to sit in the makeup chair and think about what I was doing that day, and that was good. It was cool. I mean, you know, it's interesting to have that be a part of my job, to show up 4.5 hours before everybody else, and you know, it really does put me in a specific mindset for the day, which is nice, you know, to get to adopt and kind of drop into that version of the character and kind of apply him layer by layer. And every day, you know, Joel and Richie Alonso and Cheryl Daniels, who does the wigs, you know, the three of them and me were together sometimes from the crack of dawn, or before actually, and really like putting it on, you know, and it was a cool experience. So. And I think it really informs who Charlie Manx is to the audience. You don't see stage 5 yet. In the pilot, all you see is up to 4. You meet him in 4, and then he ages backwards, obviously, as he takes the kid to Christmasland, and that becomes the sort of routine. And then we save 5. You'll see it later. It's all really based on the source material, and as Ashleigh said, I mean, we were really lucky to have this book. You know, we had. You know, one of the best things about this show was that, you know, all the scripts were pretty well written before we started shooting. So we knew where we were going, and we were able to have conversations with Jamie about the journeys of our characters throughout the season. And that's a real gift. When you're doing a television show, I mean, you know, anytime you have the opportunity to work with somebody that's already written is such a blessing, because otherwise you're kind of figuring things out as you go, and things can change, and then you can fall behind, and it can be a real challenge. And for me, it was really about the book. You know, it was really about reading and kind of going back over passages in the book to kind of understand the psychology of the character. And then physically, it was about just me personally adopting. You know, I worked. There's a movement coach who I know and have worked with before, and so we got together a couple of times, and it was really just about saying, like, okay, well, where does this kind of atrophy live in the human body, and where does this kind of unprocessed trauma look for manifestation physically? You know, Manx is somebody that's always grabbing, like always reaching for things. So there was a lot with the hands that I thought was important as he got older, and, you know, these sort of claws and the nails and all of that, and, you know, the hunched over aspect of it. So that was really just about me kind of dropping into my physical body and figuring out where he lives in me. I didn't really use any other kind of derivative source material. I thought there was enough there between the conversations that I was having with Jamie and her scripts that she, you know, wrote with her team, and Joe's book.
Loved about what Jamie did was that I think Jamie really helped with Bing's journey. Jamie's over there. Jamie, thank you for that, by the way. No, she really did. She by making Bing, by giving him access to Ashleigh's character, Vic, it sort of brings him much more into the story. So it becomes much harder for us to see him slowly being dragged over to Charlie Manx and over to his cause. And Charlie does everything he can to make sure that Bing believes in the cause. And like you said before, I mean, at the heart of it, Charlie Manx says that he's trying to save children from bad parents, and I think most of us could agree we would all be willing to take part in that, but not in the way he would. But so I think what attracted me to the story was just like, when I read the book, I remember I really enjoyed Bing's character, but when I got the scripts, I was really thankful for that I could really connect with him on an even deeper level, I think. through the scripts. And you know, it's hard to, because you were talking about, like, you know, playing someone who is basically a monster in many ways. We as actors, we don't really get to, I don't, at least, I don't feel I have the right to judge anyone, so I have to approach any character, I have to approach him through a way of trying to understand, even when that's really hard to do, and sort of try and dislocate myself and my own person and my own opinions from that of the characters. And I don't know, I mean, I love Bing quite a bit, and I feel for him very much. I think the right amount of how much I should feel for him. But I really look forward to, you know, you only get one scene with him in the pilot, but I really look forward to people seeing where it goes. And I mean, I just remember having so much fun doing it, even as scary and as horrible as some of those days were at work. It's still so much fun when you get to work with so many talented people and work on a beautiful, scary story. And that's exactly what NOS4A2 is. It is so beautiful but so terrifying at the same time.
I was really interested in how you were going to play Bing and so on, and I think what you did with the character, what existed in the book, and what Jamie brought to the script was kind of epitomized all of what we've been talking about in terms of this kind of loss of innocence, the wounded child, and how that manifests if the trauma isn't dealt with. And it really is quite, you can really see it in Bing's character, because you have this grown man who has this innocence and this childlike presence, and you see his, you know, everyone has a gift and a shadow, and it's how those things are kind of either nurtured and what you choose to engage and how you choose to wield those aspects of yourself. But in the case of children, a lot of that is taken out of your control. And yeah, I just think that the dichotomy that you played with was just so brilliant, and being on the receiving end of it was conflicting in and of itself. And I'm just really passionate about. Pay me back later. But I'm just really passionate about that aspect of the storytelling and the characters, that they are so three-dimensional, and we aren't just given these kind of binaries and black and white people, good and evil, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, which I think is incredibly important, especially when you're doing a story like this. Is that yeah, it's just so important that you're not just able to pick a side and that's it, because you know, you wanna engage people to watch it, and starting to second guess your. Well, I know that me and Jamie, what we're hoping is that you'll constantly be conflicted about whom to support, and hopefully you'll feel a little bit guilty for loving Bing, but you know what I mean? That's what I'm hoping will happen, is sort of you'll be moving back and forth, because you'll realize that, and I think it can speak for all of the characters, is that it's not as simple as being good or bad. It is layers of everything, and like you said before, you can be good and bad at the same time.
I improved with you, or you led the improv boat a little bit. He's an incredible writer. Yeah, no, but he comes up with these little lines here and there that catch me off guard sometimes, even if it's. I really enjoyed it. There would be times when we'd be doing a scene and it would be my coverage, and Ebon would add some. I don't know if you remember any of this.
Yeah.
You'd add something in to kind of generate a different reaction in me that was unexpected, and it was incredible to work like that. I really enjoyed it.
So to be clear, when it was on, the camera was on me, I would be saying the lines as written. But when the camera was not on me, and it wasn't even going to matter about what I said, I would improvise a little bit.
Because it creates this kind of organic,
I would do that also with the kids, because it was interesting to work with kids as much as I did on the show. You know, and to kind of change it up for them a little bit, and make it maybe a little like maybe a little scarier sometimes. But they were such pros, man. I mean, they really were. They were impressive. Darby and Asher, and I mean, all the kids on the show were. And I just, you know, I think also like the show did a really good job of taking care of the kids, which I think is important when you're telling stories as dark as these. You know, I was very appreciative of the way that our producers really made sure that the well-being of the kids psychologically and physically was like the #1 priority throughout, and just making sure that everybody got taken care of. But you know, throwing them some curveballs as well to just keep it spicy for the cameras. But yeah, that is a fun aspect of what we're able to do, is to kind of elicit different reactions from one another. And the more we get to know each other, and the more we get to work with each other, the more fun that becomes.
Yeah. But yeah, in answer to the previous question, I definitely experienced that because I kind of came in trying to create Vic that was in the book, and we had many conversations about how we actually had to create the arc of Vic from age 6 or 8 through to the 18-year-old. So we're not kind of jumping in on 18-year-old Vic without exploring her character development. But the setup director, Kari, really encouraged me to bring my own quirks and so on to the character, which I was surprised about. But yeah,